Searching for guidance in the startup world? Meet David Stengle, a seasoned expert in startup ecosystems with experience as an operator, investor, and advisor. He'll share insights into startup community building, governance, inclusion, and metrics while highlighting his work with Startup Grind, Princeton and Board in empowerment underrepresented executives. Tune in to learn practical strategies for growing your startup and fostering your innovation. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it very much. You've got quite, no pun intended, a diverse background here, so to speak. I guess let's start off with, I think you're involved in the Diversity Finance Authority, right? You're a board member there?
Yeah, the EDA Diversity Financial Advisory Board.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got connected to that?
Absolutely. So after a career as a startup operator primarily, I've been doing startup community organizing events for the last 10 years. And in that capacity have done work with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, been on their technology advisory board, and had some EDA officials speak at some of my events. And last September, as part of the Murphy administration's focus on inclusion, they added a diversity financial advisory board to the EDA. And the idea really is there's a lot of programs that the EDA provides which have benefits, non-dilutive benefits, meaning it's free money for founders, but not every community is getting that message effectively. And so the Diversity Financial Advisory Board is really doing two things. One is thinking about the programs that are offered and making sure they're a good fit for all of New Jersey. And second, going to groups that are overlooked or are not participating particularly and saying, what can we do to help you raise awareness about these programs and take full advantage of it? And it's a little bit like when you do any government program, you want people to use it. If you're giving out cereal coupons, you want people to not redeem the coupons. But if you're giving out benefits programs, the whole point is to deliver the benefits to the people.
Right. You create that leverage, right? And the government kind of helps to come back in and do that leverage thing. So it sounds to me like you have two different areas. So I guess we'll start with which would be the more generic, which would be the whole. Like, what's the scope? What's generally the scope of what their goal is there, and then we'll get into like. The overlooked or the other communities that maybe need a little extra help. So what's the big picture?
So the Economic Development Authority is a Big Ten, and they do all kinds of initiatives. The things that I'm most familiar with are for venture startups. So my focus is in the venture, traditional, cliche, Silicon Valley, Facebook, Google kind of startups. And in that area, the EDA has done a number of things. They have a subsidy program for co-working spaces. So if you are a really early startup and aren't ready to have your own office, or you want to work in a co-working space, there's a program that will underwrite part of the rent. There's a program that gives tax credits to angel investors. So that's good for the angel investor. If you're an angel investor, you should definitely be aware of it. If you're an investor looking to raise angel money, it's an opportunity for you to get additional benefits if you're based in New Jersey. There's a fellowship program that launched last year, and the first cohort of a dozen fellows launched in February. I think we had the formal announcement. And this is a way to have the state take a real bet on some exciting founders. They're actively recruiting for the second cohort, and I would encourage anyone as an early stage founder to take a look at that program and apply if they see a fit, but go for it. And then
So what does that what does that program provide to somebody that's maybe in that position?
Some cash, and being brought into the I'll say the EDA tent, but there's part of getting going as a startup is plugging into the local venture ecosystem. And so the Economic Development Authority has a group that focuses on venture activity. They have a bunch of industry contacts. They have a bunch of additional programs. For example, if you're doing a startup that needs a wet lab, there's a program where you can get funding to use a wet lab at a university. So this can cost plenty of coin at the beginning, and you can get something like $40,000 a year to use lab gear at Princeton or Rutgers. And that's just one example. There are all kinds of programs. Part of why the board is in place is there's probably 70 EDA startup programs, and if you asked me to recite them all, I'd fail miserably.
No, I won't do that to you.
Yeah. But the point is the Murphy administration in particular has leaned hard into this. First Lady Tammy Murphy took the initiative to help Golden Seeds, which is an angel investment group focused on female founders, to launch a New Jersey chapter a couple of years back. And the Murphy administration has also done this very innovative and I think globally leading initiative to identify some early stage venture fund managers that are targeting specific constituencies or segments. I had one of them speak at a recent event. So there's Squire Servants founded a venture fund looking specifically at conditions that are prevalent in underserved markets, which is a poorly capitalized and area that has opportunity for innovation. There's another, Red Bike Capital, does consumer products and has the MDs there are amazing. So the administration has partnered with specific funds with specific investment theses that are aimed at helping the whole state of New Jersey and looking at groups that historically
are there certain areas? I remember years ago, I know at the chamber they talked about how, at least one of the speakers did, he was talking about how New Jersey wanted to be kind of like, quote, the Silicon Valley of the East kind of thing. They wanted to really not lose these people. Like they get to a certain point and they just go to California. Right. They go to Silicon Valley, and it's like, well, why are we letting that happen? Why don't we keep them here?
Absolutely.
And keep our ecosystem in place? Is this kind of part of that whole philosophy?
Yeah. So I think every business community wants to figure out how to keep businesses staying with the community. Right. And so there's, on the one hand, we have Choose New Jersey, which is trying to bring businesses in from every other state. And then we have programs designed to make it attractive for people to stay here. And part of it is I kind of roll my eyes at we want to be the Silicon Valley of, which everybody says. And I think the right way to go through that is to say, what's special about New Jersey? So New Jersey, we're the medicine cabinet of the world. Right. We have incredible fintech. We're a highly educated, wealthy state leading the country, top 5 in per capita income, top 5 in education, engineers. There's a rich body of technical talent. So it's looking at the things that we're good at and the things that are here and not trying to say we're going to copy the Valley because, the Valley's great and it has its own strengths. Right. And we're going to do better doubling down on what New Jersey's good at than trying to imitate San Francisco.
Oh, I would agree. Every place has their own personality. Yeah. I think the argument was, I think that was kind of like just this term that was thrown out. I think the argument was, we don't want to lose these early stage entrepreneurs. Right. They're going other places to find venture capital. And we don't want them to leave.
There's two parts to that. One is that quarantine really changed the game, and it's now possible to do fundraising without relocating it's much more common than it used to be. And it's much further down the pipeline in a venture investor assessing a company that they expect an in-person meeting. So there's some democratization of access to capital. There are still, and I think always will be, two tribes around this philosophically. There are the Y Combinators of the world that say you have to come to San Francisco and kiss the ring, and only then will you achieve startup enlightenment. And then there are the 500 startups of the world that say entrepreneurs are everywhere. We want to find you. We want to support you where you are. And so don't go to the Y Combinators if you want to stay in New Jersey, right? But there are lots of ways to stand up a business and keep it here. So part of it is, as a founder, what's the lifestyle you want to lead? I can tell you that housing is cheaper here than in Palo Alto.
I think almost everywhere.
Yeah.
Palo Alto.
Yeah. You can pay $1 zillion for a closet.
Right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, so we're going to take a quick break now. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with David Stengle, and we're kind of talking about the general NJDEA, right?
Sure.
Which is great. And so you have the basic mission of the organization, but now you came in to join the board there, which is more focused on some of these nuanced areas where people might need a little extra help. So can you explain a little bit about who those people are, what their special needs might be that might be a little different than the general population, and how do we address those to help them in ways that maybe they're not currently being helped, that maybe they need, that other people may not need?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd say that the Diversity Financial Advisory Board is still early days, and the way we've organized the advisory board is to have two subcommittees, one focused on entrepreneurs and one focused on investors. So part of what we want to do is make it easy for investors to operate in the state and find good deals, get good access to founders. I am focused on the investor side, and my whole jam is about making it easier for first-time founders to get into the venture club. Mm-hmm. I have been in that situation, and once you get in, a lot of nice things can happen, and it's harder to get in than it needs to be. So the focus of the subcommittee that we're on, the entrepreneurship committee, is really helping to identify entrepreneurs that are thinking about doing their startup and in the early stages of that, and making sure that they're tapping into all the resources that they need. And so, I mean, one example that I give is I live in Princeton. Princeton University has a tremendous portfolio of resources to help a founder. So if you're a Princeton student, you can practically wave your hand and get mobbed by resources. Mm-hmm. But I had, for example, a guy, Anthony Frazier, who's a successful entrepreneur many times over now, does work at Newark Venture Partners. But Anthony got his start because he was loading trucks at the graveyard shift at Walmart, and the rest of his shift didn't show up. And they were like, yeah, you got to load everything yourself. And he was like, man, I'm so done with this. And he started looking for a different job and interviewed with the company, and we need help on our website, and here's how much volume we're getting. He goes, I get more than that on my gaming site. And they're like, please come help us. and now he's doing podcasts. He's on the Innovator 100 list. But in terms of where, as Startup Grind, as the EDA, Diversity Financial Advisory Board, I'm looking to help the Anthonys of the world find their way into how do I get coaching? How do I get mentors? How do I get non-dilutive capital? How do I get instruction? And there's a ton of resources available on the internet. I think Y Combinator's university resources are incredible, and every founder should study them. But there are also a number of programs. So, for example, I work with I-Corps, and I-Corps is an initiative initially started by the National Science Foundation and now spanning many federal agencies. But it's about helping first-time founders figure out what they should do. And the super short version of what they do is like, yeah, whatever great idea you have, nice, but shut up and listen to customers. Go out of the building, take off your lab coat, step away from the bench, stop looking at your tech, go listen in the world and say, what are the problems out there? How might we solve those problems with some humility? Yeah. And many of these founders, I'm old enough, in the 90s, there was this music movement in Seattle called shoegaze. and it was called shoegaze because the guitarists would just stare at their shoes while they played. Like they didn't move, they didn't talk, they didn't jump around, they didn't, zero energy, right? And like, don't be the shoegaze founder. Be the go out in the world and talk to people. Yeah. And that's part of building the community. It's part of getting comfortable talking to angels. It's part of telling your story. So there are pitch events. There are a number of groups that in the state that do pitch events. Startup Grind does some. I've done some at some conferences I've organized. But there are many other groups, and it's one way to polish your message, because at the end of the day, when you're a founder, and I tell every founder this, first you're selling a dream, and then you're selling traction. So when you're selling the dream, you're telling a story, and you want to tell the story well. You want to get feedback on the story. You want to see where people are like, what are you talking about? I don't get it, to the point where it just hits the bloodstream like sugar, right? Like bang, you just get it. And then once you're at that point and you find out who your audience is that really gets it, then you're figuring out, all right, how do I convert that story into traction?
Yeah, a couple things in there, which I think is interesting. I know a lot of people that start like newer businesses. Yeah. They're always, they have this fear of, if I talk about it, people are going to steal my business. Yeah,
it's a rookie mistake.
And I've found myself, and I have to be honest, I'm guilty of that myself years ago. But the more you share, the more you learn from everybody. In fact, I have great relationships with what you might call competitors, right?
Absolutely.
Because we all do things a little differently. And what I do, even though we might have the same, quote, title, we do it differently. And our client base is just different.
It's a great point. So I'd say a couple things around that. The metaphor that I like the best is every conversation that you have in the market with exposing your ideas, like seasoning for food, it just gets better.
Right.
The first-time founders often overrate the importance of their ideas. So typically, as an investor, I've seen 50 or 100 people pitch me the same idea often, and they're like, "Oh, if I tell you this, I have to kill you." It's like, okay.
I just heard this 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. I got pitched on this last week. I got pitched on this the week before. So there's that part of it,
right,
which at best shows naivete about the market conditions they're in, and at worst is like, okay, you can't really carry on a conversation. I think another, I'm pretty harsh on this, but another punk move is, I can't tell you that without an NDA. And it's like, if you can't tell me what you're doing, I have no confidence in you as a communicator. Like, I get that there's some things that are secret. And I, in fact, started my career as a spook where, we couldn't talk about our job much, but I could still say I'm a spook. I learned Russian. I'm tracking the Soviet Navy. Like, there's something you can say. And if you can't find a way to say
you just
something,
don't give your exact coordinates at any given point, right?
It's really different to say, I tracked the Soviet Navy in the Middle East compared to, this sub moved here, like
the details you don't need to, you can get the concept over without the details.
When you're introducing your startup, you better be able to say, this is what I do, and this is why it's shiny, and why you should care.
And I find you get great feedback from especially entrepreneurs that are further along the path.
Yeah.
If they've done the same thing, they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine, but here's the issues that we found, and if you're going to do that, you need to be aware of these items.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, you're going to run into the same problem I ran into.
So you should know your competitors, and you should figure out why what you're doing is different and special. And if it's not different and special, doesn't mean it's impossible to have a business, but then why are you doing it instead of selling for somebody that's already done all those things if that's what you want to do?
I liked how you said that, because a lot of times, and they do that like in marketing, is you model your competitors. You say, well, what are they doing that's successful?
Right.
And how can I like tweak that a little bit to make it my own? Right. Because they're already successful.
Right.
Listen to them for whatever 80-90% of what they're doing. Don't copy it. Obviously, that's illegal. But you can certainly watch the methodology behind how they're doing things and what they're doing.
And it's not even always illegal to copy stuff. I mean, some stuff is just like, I'm going to give advice, and other people give advice, or I'm a marketing firm. Other people are doing more.
Right.
But it's like, why am I the guy? Right. And there can be a lot of different whys. but you should have high conviction about this is why I'm a better deal for you. And if you
Right.
don't believe it, I don't know why you'd expect anybody else to believe it.
Right.
Right.
And you mentioned something earlier on, which I think is really, really important, is the coaching and the mentoring
Yeah.
aspect of this, because almost everybody I know of, including myself, that's been successful, there was somebody you were following
Sure.
or somebody that was coaching you and kind of walking you through the process. Because honestly, we can't live long enough to learn the experience of all the other people out there that have done what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You're just not going to live that long. So you better learn from others, because that's the shortcut.
Absolutely. And there's Ben Franklin is one version of this quote, and I don't think I'll get it exactly right. But the idea is experience might be the best teacher, but it's a really expensive one. There's better ways to learn than, okay, that failed and I went bankrupt, right?
Right.
So I think that every person for their company, but for their life, should think about a formal or informal board of advisors. And who I have people that I go to when I'm thinking about marketing. I have people that I go to when I'm thinking about life decisions. I have people that I go to when I'm thinking about health issues. Just build that network with intention. And if you're starting a business, look at the skills you have and your team has, and look at the holes, because there are holes, and think about who can I recruit that believes in my dream that can fill those holes. And maybe it's a short-term fill, like we're doing a medical device and we don't really know how the regulatory pathway works, and we're going to find somebody that's done 5 medical device companies and has been through the regulatory pathway and knows
Right.
some people at the FDA. Or it can be something like, I've really never set up a sales commission plan before, and I know I need to do it. We're going to die if we don't sell, but once I go beyond personal effort, what do I do? Because every salesperson that's any good will be able to tell you why you should pay them more, right? So
Sure.
like, how do I push
Right.
back against that
Yep.
in a constructive way?
Absolutely.
So those are just a couple examples. But
Those are fantastic. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm with David Stengle, and we're talking about entrepreneurship and how important it is to get help. And there's some great programs that are available here in New Jersey. And you're specifically part of the Diversity Finance Board, which is cool. And in there, you specifically want to help like the underserved community. Can you tell us a little about like who that is, if they're out there, and how they might get connected, whether they're part of that community or just part of the general population? Also might want to connect with the bigger programs as well.
Sure. So if you look at the composition of venture-backed company founders, and these numbers might be a year or two out of date, but they're directionally correct. About 82% of venture-backed startups have an all-male founding team. Venture investors and founders heavily over-index for Ivy League schools, especially Harvard and Stanford. It's a very wealthy group, and there's a lot of conversation about, hey, if you do a startup, you're going to get this equity payout on the back end, so you should work for nothing or for limited wages. Well, if your family's poor and you can't live off your parents,
That might be difficult.
right? That's a harder conversation. Right. And the most extreme example I'll give is I have a good friend that is just really well connected with money, and did a startup and joined it, and they did a friends and family round, and she was tight with a whole bunch of hedge fund managers, and they raised like $500,000 in a week, and it was like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, right? Like, and that's not the world of most. That's not most people. Of us, right? That's
Right.
not me. That's
Right.
not the startups I work with. So part of it is the whole, and that's an egregiously extreme example, but
Right.
the idea is there are people that come for money, and it's like, yeah, I have no college debt because my parents paid the.
They haven't known the struggle.
Right. And it's like, this is not a problem. And then there's people, it's like, I need to pay my bills. How do I do this? And navigating into the system and making sure that they can find grant money, early stage investment, and be scrappy and navigate into getting ready for institutional capital is really, really important. So I think that part of it is making sure that entrepreneurs that are thinking about doing the startup journey understand how hard it is. And I think there's a tendency to romanticize the effort. And I see occasionally, oh yeah, I maxed out all my credit card bills and I mortgaged my house and I made it. And I don't think, great job, founder. I think you're an irresponsible idiot, right? So part of it is, and I mean, circumstances may vary, but that's my gut reaction, right? Is you want to find a way to do right by your family, to do right by your finances. There are programs, for example, aimed at you can do a soft launch of your startup evenings and learn about startups and learn about putting your business plan together and learn about putting your pitch deck together and not quit your day job, right? And there's a whole, keep paying the bills, don't be crazy, be responsible. Part of what I look for in founders is, are you fiscally responsible? I want you to be tight with money, right? And not just, oh yeah, whatever. If I fail, it all burns up.
I think you bring out a key point is that if you start it with and maintaining your existing job. Because I think they go, well, I have to work 40 hours a week or whatever, and how am I going to spend? How much time do I have to really get in a job? I need to quit my job to have the time. And I think a lot of them don't realize that when you actually are on your own, there are no 40-hour weeks anymore. It's like whatever you need to get it done. It's like there is no clock anymore.
I tell my kids and pretty
goes
much
away.
Anyone that listens, what's the difference between a job and a career? 30 hours a week.
Right.
You're going to be working. And if you probably, this is a generalization, but if you're doing a 40-hour a week job and you're doing 30 hours a week getting your startup ready, when you do that startup full time, you're going to be doing 70. So you're not, if that load is too much, then that's already maybe this isn't for you. It's not for everybody.
Right, understood. Yeah. It takes time before you see the guy hanging out on the yacht in the bay all day in the afternoon.
It is a marathon.
That's a long road.
And I tell founders, when you do this, when you take your first investor check, look across the table and think, I'm getting married to this person for at least 7 years. And if that makes you throw up in your mouth a little bit, then don't take that check because this is like the best, happiest moment you're going to have for those 7 years.
You just brought up something interesting. I wonder if you could talk about that relationship, how investor, entrepreneur, that relationship is really key.
Yeah.
Like it has to align for both sides. You want to talk a little bit about that, how that works and why every investor and every entrepreneur are not made to match up with each other?
Sure. So part of it is chemistry.
Right.
And that's true for your co-founders as well. Part of it is there are style differences and structure differences, especially at the angel level. There are angel groups that are extremely formal in their methodologies and what they look for. I would give a New Jersey example is Kairetsu Forum, which is a very disciplined, thorough, financially oriented assessment process. There are people that are really like, look, if I think the founder's good, really I'm picking a jockey, not a horse, and it's early enough. Yeah, makes sense. Go try it. Go see what. If your model is good, I'm willing to write a check of this size for you to go prove the next points. And I'm really believing in the team. And I've never met an investor that said that anything was more important than the team. So it's all about that. And I think every founder should remember that the first thing they're selling is themselves. And part of that is be the person you're proud to sell. Do your homework, learn about venture deals, learn why you should have a safe note and not a convertible note, right? Learn, just be ready, be smart, be educated, be prepared. When you go in and talk to an investor, you should know every board seat they hold. You should know the last 10 checks they wrote. You should be prepared in that conversation and drop your understanding weave it into what you're saying to them. Because if you're not, it's sort of like if you write your resume and you have a typo,
Right.
I'm not going to believe that you can do any document.
True.
Right. It's just, if you didn't care about your resume, we're done.
That's pretty bad.
Right. And it's sort of like that as an investor. If you're not taking me seriously when you're asking me for money, how are you going to do a sales call? Right.
Right.
So remember to represent and do your prep.
That makes a lot of sense. You do due diligence on the investor just as much as, because the investor's certainly going to do due diligence on you.
Absolutely.
They're going to want to know who you are and what's your...
And they will respect you more if you show them preparation. I mean, if you have a choice, okay, here's somebody that comes to a meeting and they're like, yeah, what do you do? Who are your partners compared to, oh, I see that, you're a former lacrosse player and,
Right.
my co-founder used to play lacrosse or whatever,
Yeah, I was invited. This reminded me. I was invited to I think it was like, what's it called? New York Summit Venture Capital, something.
Okay.
Whatever it was in New York City. I was invited there by an entrepreneur. I mean, he's a capitalist. So
yeah.
And we were watching his presentation. He was one of the judges of like who gets this award. It was for competition, one of these deals.
Yeah.
And literally, a woman got up there and goes, "You can tell I'm not prepared for this presentation, but here we go."
Yeah.
Basically, and I was like, we kind of looked at each other. We're like, why did you even come into the building? We were like, I don't understand. And I was amazed at how many were not prepared, knowing they were coming to give a presentation in front of all these different angel and venture capitalists. It was shocking to me. In fact, my comment to him was like, isn't there a business to prep people to do these presentations? He goes, yes, there is.
There is.
So I think people need, I guess what I'm saying is people need to take it more seriously. And I saw it actually in play.
Absolutely.
Most of them are not. So you're going to be ahead of like 80, 90% of it if you just take the process seriously.
Right. So invest in it and tell your story. And what I say about pitch events is they're an important part of the chain. They're fun to attend, for me anyway. Mm-hmm. The goal of a pitch event from a founder's perspective is very rarely to win the prize. There are a few prizes where it's $1 million, it's real. Most of them are, you have $10,000 or $20,000 in soft services, so it's like, yeah, you can take a meeting with us and we won't charge you, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, but the feedback is magic,
right?
And when you start, you'll get advice. Conflicting advice. Part of your job as a founder is people tell you to go left and go right, and you have to decide who to listen to.
Right.
But when you stop getting new advice, then stop going to pitch events because you're there for the new advice. And when you hear something once, whatever, if you hear it repeatedly, then take it seriously. So that's, I mean, there's a lot more nuance to that, but that's
good advice.
Too long didn't read. Just, if two people tell you the same thing, I didn't understand what you were talking about on your unit economics, then you probably aren't explaining your unit economics well.
Right.
And once you hear nothing new, don't waste your time. Unless you feel you need practice on the presentation side. You should be able, as a founder, to tell your story in your sleep, in an elevator, anywhere, anytime, to any person with conviction.
Awesome. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with David Stengle. And that was great. Great advice as far as going to the pitch events and to get information, feedback. I think a lot of it's about feedback, right? You get out there, you talk about it, you get feedback. You're also involved in some other things, one of which is called Startup Grind. You want to tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved?
Sure. So Startup Grind is a global network in hundreds of cities across the globe, over 125 countries, and millions of members. And it's about educating, connecting, and inspiring entrepreneurs. So I started the Princeton chapter in 2014. We've had 133 startup events since then, and we do one or two every month, workshops, fireside chats with founders and investors, a couple of parties a year, occasional. We had a big AI conference last month, and we'll do one of those every year, I think, going forward. I'm a big believer in AI. But Startup Grind is just a way to help you connect with the startup ecosystem. And I encourage anyone and everyone listening to this to find a chapter near them and attend those events. The philosophy is make friends, not contacts, give first. It's a very nurturing community. I've made lifelong friends there, and totally drink the Kool-Aid, so I'm completely biased. But we hold events locally here at facility.
Is that for all stages of entrepreneurship or certain stages? What do they mainly focus on as far as who attends?
Different chapters have different areas of concentration. My theme is really about wider access. So I'm focused on what I call pre-napkin, which is you're not ready to write 3 bullets on a napkin yet. You haven't incorporated. You're not sure what to do, up to A round. And by the time you're doing your A round, you're raising millions of dollars. You have professional money in, and they are helping you navigate that process. So I'm really, how do you go from the outside to the inside? And for example, every year I do a workshop that's, here's all the things you need to know to incorporate without spending too much money. And you can spend $3,000 and incorporate and get everything you need. You can spend $15,000 and incorporate in.
I'd go with a 3 as a startup, personally.
Well, so and you can do it in ways that, 5 years later you're going to pay a lot more taxes, and there are just a few hygiene things that every founder should know. But if you haven't done it before, there's no reason that you would know them. So that's just one example. So that startup grind, it's very chill. The vibe that we try for at most of our events is to have an interesting fireside chat where you think about being at a bar and the next table over is having this conversation and you're kind of leaning like, what are they saying? That sounds interesting.
These tend to be fairly large or small or intimate or various sizes?
So it's a couple dozen. So most startup grind cities are Beijing, New York, London, and Princeton is quite a bit smaller than that.
Okay.
So we get a couple dozen people, but I just got back from Startup Grind Global, where I go every year. That's in Redwood City in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm going to brag a little bit, but was the sole inductee into the Hall of Fame this year.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
But we've also won Inclusivity Awards and Humblest Brag Award, and here I am bragging. And,
Humblest Brag Award. I like that. Kind of a contradiction term, is it a little bit?
A little bit. But
Humblest brag.
So it's supposed to be for somebody that just does the work and doesn't,
I gotcha.
I gotcha. It might be the lame social marketing award. And then some awards for being one of the most active chapters globally. But it's a great way to just plug in and get introduced around the ecosystem. Okay. It's not focused on a particular technology or industry, but it is aimed at venture-backed startups. So if you're ultimately looking to raise venture money.
Okay. So it's a great way to make contacts and learn a little bit about the process and how to save some money and get things done a little more efficiently, it sounds like.
There's also a chapter in Trenton. There's a chapter in New York.
Oh, wow.
There are the Trenton chapter is new, but I've been working with John Snee, who's doing a great job there.
Excellent. And we need more of that.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, I go to his events and he comes to my events.
There you go.
And Trenton and Princeton are 10 miles, but sometimes it feels like a long distance, we get different people.
Different flavors and feelings and as far as what's going on.
So part of it is bringing everyone together. And I think that's
and you learn from each other.
Absolutely.
As you know, they're both very different locations, demographically, economically, et cetera. And I'm sure you learn from each other a lot of things, I would think. So
that's a goal.
That's awesome. Another thing you're involved in is Board++.
Yep.
You want to tell us a little bit about that and how you're involved in that?
Here's the thesis of Board++ in a nutshell. If you look at the research on the behavior of any group, you really want to have a wide range of opinions. If you have a board where everybody had exactly the same opinion, even if you had 10 board members, you'd only have one idea, right? So you want to have board members that have different networks, different perspectives, and the venture community is very inbred. Mm-hmm. So you'll get typically a board member from your lead institutional investor. You'll get the founder, that's you. And if you are a founder and you're driving the process, you can appoint an independent board member early. And if you pick one that has a different network than yours and a different network from your lead investor, or a different network than what you anticipate you'll get from your lead investor if you haven't taken the investor in, you can drive a lot of value and de-risk your business And there are a ton of people from overlooked groups, however you want to call that. But that can be veterans, that can be pick your minority group, that can be women, which are not well represented in venture for sure. And there are some embarrassingly bad stories about a bunch of rich white guys in a room talking about some product for women and not making smart decisions. Right?
Well, that's not a good idea,
right? So
that's a pretty bad idea.
Just like
that's
it's
a
happened,
very bad idea.
It's happened more than once. So the idea is
the women notice it when you try to sell it to them too.
Yeah, they do
pretty quickly.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity there, and what Board Plus Plus does is it finds talented high performers in corporate America that are looking for their first board seat. And the sad reality of the way boards work in the United States, and it's pretty funny, but one stat I like is the average public board seat lasts longer than the average marriage in the United States.
Oh,
right?
Really?
It's about 9 years and change to 8 years and change. But that's not, so there's this very low turnover, very old hierarchy, looks much more like the U.S. did 50 years ago than it does today. And if you're trying to sell into the U.S. today, you want to have input that looks like the U.S. today. So we find people that have deep industry experience in corporate America typically that are interested in getting a board seat, which is a great way to grow your own executive skills.
Sure.
I will tell you, every founder, get on a board seat too. There was this great talk I heard from the founder of Rent the Runway, and she got the founder of The Knot to be on her board. And the founder of The Knot was like, I'm running a startup. Are you crazy? Like, I don't have time for this. But it was really good for both of them. And you will be a better CEO if you serve as a board member somewhere. Okay. Because you'll understand how to manage your board better. You'll understand board dynamics better. You'll understand speaking to power better. These are all skills. And I'm a huge fan of this. So I tell high school kids, like, if you want to be a CEO, think about your first board. Think about your leadership roles. Because speaking to power is an important skill.
So how would somebody go about this? What if you're one of these early stage entrepreneurs, like you're talking about these high school, college kids getting out and I'd love to be on a board. They're like, well, wait a minute, what do you know? What are you going to add to the board?
There are different pathways for sure. So you can volunteer. There are all kinds of nonprofit boards. Nonprofit boards will take anybody, and you have to write a check of a certain size. You can look for that kind of leadership role. You can signal your interest. You can work your network. It's not easy to break into boards. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to diminish the effort, but intention matters so much in everything you do. And have a plan. Go talk to board members about how did you get your first board seat? I'm looking for one. Do you have somebody young on your board that would represent, people that are not on Social Security and what their interests might be? That kind of stuff. You can put your name out there.
Use your weakness as your strength.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I met a guy that he got a job in Japan as basically a American market youth whisperer to the board. And they were
That's
like,
really funny.
Okay, man, what do young people in the U.S. think? And it's this bunch of old Japanese guys that
they probably have no idea what young kids in the U.S. think.
But they recognize their own blind spot to some degree, and so there's those things. But look at boards, and it can be any kind of pursue your interest, signal your intentions. The profile that we take at Board Plus Plus typically is, you've got 20 years experience at least in an industry. You're either managing hundreds of people or you're a subject matter expert. So you might be like chief counsel and it depends. If you worked at Goldman, you don't have to be chief counsel, right? If you work at a smaller firm, you probably do have to be. But something that has the appropriate gravitas. And then what I'd say, when you're pursuing a board seat, beyond signaling your intentions, you should be really articulate about what your board superpower is. Okay. So when you market yourself, and this is true for any job, but at an executive level, so a board, you should have your nose in and your hands off the business, right? and what can you do to really change the arc of their success path, and be crisp about that. And if you don't know it, that's some soul searching that you should do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're about to wrap up. Any final thoughts before we leave today?
Just entrepreneurship is hard. There's a reason Startup Grind has grind in it. There are resources out there to help you. And if you go on that journey, getting help is part of what will make you successful.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on board. You're listening to Master Your Finances.